Of walruses, like those of polar bears
I don't
and
like
seals,
this.
are changing.
No. I don't want to stop.
Are living at the frontier of
so
climate
sad.
change.
I don't want to
Suffering
see
as a consequence.
horrible. I don't want to see it. Stop.
Okay, so that affected me a lot more than I thought it would. Those walruses dying was just the worst thing I've ever seen. So I think that I do a lot to offset my carbon footprint, but I've actually found a website that's gonna tell me how bad it actually is or how good it actually is. But it's gonna tell me how many trees I would have to plant every year to offset my own personal carbon footprint. So let's figure this out, because I feel like I already do so much. I mean, I ride my bicycle as much as I can. Energy efficient light bulbs, check. I use reusable bags. Reusable cups, Brita filter, metal straws. I got this. Beeswax wraps, reusable plastic bags instead of cellophane. Dryer balls, yep. I use that instead of tinfoil. I compost my food. Reusable Maxi pads, it's just like a diaper. And a Diva cup. Technically, I've never used this. I'm a little intimidated. I've had it for over a year, but I promise I will. You guys are gonna hold me accountable. By the time this airs, I'll figure out how to use that thing. I line dry my puppy. I'm just kidding. That's for clothes. Come on, Happy. I even borrowed an electric car. A Model 3. Return. Let's see. It's thinking. 491. 491 trees. Like physical trees. 491 trees. I don't even know how many trees I could plant an hour. Like 2? 4? Okay. That's ridiculous. No one's gonna plant 491 trees a year. It's a nice thought. Okay, we're gonna go talk to somebody who can help me figure out how to get this number down lower, because as much as I like to garden, I'm not planting 491 trees. I don't even think that's legal.
So I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer here at UCLA. Basically, I help make UCLA more efficient, greener, cleaner, work with energy, water, transportation, food. We're kind of like a small city.
Right.
We have a daily population of like 80,000 people, so there's a big impact there, and we're working to be smarter.
I do all these little things around the house, like I use the balls in the dryer and the reusable bags and cups and all of these things that seem so small. And so then we started to try and figure out a bigger way to do that. Do people who do those little small things, does that actually matter?
It really does. You know, everyone has that question of, well, these are small choices that I'm making, do they really matter? And the answer is, I think, summed up well, and there was an Onion headline for Earth Day once that said, what does throwing one water bottle away matter? 30 million people wonder. And
yeah, that's actually really great.
They really kind of nailed it, because ultimately there's so many of us making these daily decisions.
Yeah.
And you might feel small, but they really do add up. You know, for us at UCLA, 80,000 people every day making those decisions. It does matter.
So I will always take a reusable water bottle with me. But when I travel, because I fly a ton, and I want to talk to you about that a little bit.
We'll talk about that.
But I travel a ton, and when I go to the airport, I'm like, what's one bottle of water?
Yep.
And now that's actually really interesting to think about it in that way. If I'm saying that, 30 million other people are thinking the exact same thing, and then we have an island the size of Texas made out of plastic in the ocean.
And not to mention, on flights, there's an amazing artist, Chris Jordan. Check out his work, chrisjordan.com. He has this whole series called A Portrait of American Consumption, where he visually shows you like 2 million plastic bottles, which is the number used in the US. Guess how often?
I would say like every week.
No, it's actually every 5 minutes. 2 million bottles in the US. So it's mind-boggling, and people have a hard time understanding those numbers.
Yeah.
So he does a really great job of like creating these incredible visuals. But one of them is on plastic cups on flights.
Yeah.
And it's 1 million plastic cups, and it's the amount used on flights in just 6 hours.
See, that's the interesting thing also, because, they hand out plastic cups on a plane.
Yeah.
I mean, I do understand not handing out glass, but there has to be a sustainable option for those airlines. And if the airlines all got together, that's a huge impact that could make.
It is. And I think a number of airlines are working on it. At least they've started collecting recyclables. I mean, they didn't even used to recycle.
Right.
And then, of course, the airlines are also starting to look at biofuels and some ways to improve, the actual fuel use, which is the biggest impact of the jets.
Right. Well, so that's, I think we're skipping ahead, but this is so great because what my biggest carbon footprint was airline travel and hotels.
Yeah.
I don't understand the hotel thing because is it because I crank the air conditioning up and throw away the soap after one use? Why do they have such an impact on the environment? And then also obviously flights.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I'm not an expert on the hotel question.
Right.
I would think, though, that some of it is that you already have a house and all of the impact of that house. And so now you have this additional place you're staying when you travel. That's probably part of it. A lot of hotels are also starting to work on their footprints, and they have things like those signs in the room that you can choose not to wash everything daily and do all of that excess stuff.
And they have there's that one soap company who goes around and takes the partially used
slivers
soaps,
of soap.
and they melt them down and they send them to people who need soap, which is a great thing.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well. We've been implementing a lot of similar measures.
What do you think, as an individual person, the biggest culprit is for most people?
Flights are a big one for a lot of people, actually. Oftentimes when my students do their footprint, that's the one that surprises them a little. They're like, oh, I didn't realize my flights had such an impact. Transportation is big. So if people are driving, especially single occupant vehicles, that's often a very big part of their footprint. But the one that people don't often think about, and I'm glad that you are, is that supply chain one. What are you eating? What are you buying? What are you doing in terms of disposables? And fashion can be a big one.
I just started, a girlfriend of mine sort of got me on this kick of wanting to buy vintage clothing now because where does your clothing come from? You think about a pair of jeans, you buy them in Los Angeles, but where did they come from? And think of the environmental impact of getting those jeans to you in Los Angeles or wherever they are.
Yeah, there's a huge environmental and carbon impact to fast fashion. When the styles are turning over all the time and you're buying these cheap, not really made to last clothes. And people love fashion, of course. And so it's this big struggle where people are trying to figure out, can we have style but do it in a more responsible way? And there's some interesting work going on, in the industries right now. But I think ultimately one of the best things you can do is have some timeless pieces that you're not switching all the time, which is a shift in thinking for a lot of people, especially, you're making a living in an area where appearance matters a lot. Right. And I'm sure fashion has to be a big focus for you. But taking a stand and saying, I'm not gonna switch out things every couple months. Yeah. Or if you switch, do it through swaps. So I have friends who host clothing swaps, and instead of buying new stuff, they'll bring everything. They have like a brunch, and then you can go and kind of trade with each other.
See, I love that idea. My friend Bianca Kylek, who's another actress, wrote this Instagram post about it where she said, in the television shows that she was on and that I've been on for not me, because I'm stuck in space and in Westerns, but the show she's been on, they change a woman's clothing every episode, and they never wear the same thing twice. And so we're sort of made to believe as women in this country or in our country that women who are of a certain means don't wear the same clothes all the time.
Right.
And so you sort of look down upon it, I guess, or I did, and I do find myself as I get older now shifting more to like this bohemian sort of vintage lifestyle.
It's one that comes more naturally for me, but not because of sustainability, just because I'm not much of a fashionista. Like I was kind of a tomboy growing up, and so I have my couple suits and, my tops and everything. And so I do tend to wear the same thing a lot. And even me, growing up how I did and being how I am, I still struggle a little bit with, are people going to judge me for always wearing the same thing? But now I realize, this can even be a statement about my values and, not being wasteful. So
that's a way of
works out
shifting
nicely
it,
for
though.
me.
Consumerism is bad for the environment.
And
who knew? I've heard so many times by older generations that the earth is just righting itself. This reminds me of the weather of my childhood. It was so cold we used to drive across the river, and it just seems like it's shifting back. Does that sound as crazy to you as it does to me?
I think it's a big topic, kind of. Climate change or climate emergency denial. I think a lot of people shouldn't still be struggling with it, but they are. There's a challenge with science communication, and the science is very clear, but sometimes that doesn't reach everybody. Right. And especially with different, kind of media having different biases. And it's actually an issue that UCLA is working on. So we have, at our Institute of Environment and Sustainability, we have a new center called the Laboratory for Environmental Narrative Strategies.
That's so interesting and so important.
It is. And so it's really looking at how do we communicate about science? You know, scientists aren't always good at storytelling. One of my colleagues here on the communication side, John Christensen, he puts it, you know, numbers numb and stories stick. So, you know, stories reach people, and so much of initial communication around climate change was various graphs and things. And now I think people are realizing, oh, you know, we need to tell the stories. And the stories are there. I mean, people are being impacted by this today. We have a faculty member, Alex Hall, and he has a Center for Climate Science here at UCLA, and they've been doing all of this modeling for the Los Angeles area. So they're able to take like 30 different global climate models and actually downscale them to LA to the neighborhood level.
Oh, wow.
Like how many 100-degree days are you going to have in, you know, Westwood or in Van Nuys, and spoiler alert, the Valley is going to get a lot of this, right?
Exactly.
But one of his predictions was around wildfires and the increase in wildfires, and it's already happening.
It's already happening.
And you have people losing their homes, lives in danger, and so you don't need to think about the future to talk about climate change impacts. And so I think when you share those stories with people, the really individual ones, you end up reaching people in a different way than just thinking this broad, far away kind of problem.
Well, that's sort of what I've sort of started focusing on now, is we think about climate change on such a global impact sometimes, and to make it more of a local, individual impact and issue sort of does help, you know? Like
a lot of the science around communication and climate change psychology shows that if you just give people the doom and gloom, it's almost overwhelming and they can't process it. And so they think, oh, this is a faraway problem. This isn't something that's going to impact me. But if you pair it with these solutions like you're doing, then people realize, okay, this is real, and they feel empowered to do something.
Right. There's a part of me now that wants to go and plant so much milkweed in the front of my house and just be like, this is for the monarchs, for pollination, and my mom and brother raise bees. And does that help the environment? Like doing the monarchs and the bees and whatever you can do to actually like stop what you're doing, but actually put back.
Exactly. I'll share with you, I have a TEDx UCLA talk on that topic about like planting pollinator friendly plants and how little actions add up, and the butterfly effect. So absolutely it matters, you know, taking out your lawn and planting pollinator-friendly plants. You know, it is time to go beyond just sustaining and to do things that are restorative. You know, you read about, there was this couple who planted the millions of trees on their own. They bought a piece of land and basically like restored the forest. I'll have to look up
that's
where
amazing.
It was.
Yeah.
There was a guy in India who did that as well. So I think a lot of people are realizing it's not just about reducing negative impact. It's also what can we do to restore the earth, and absolutely planting a beautiful garden. And the thing is, again, these are things that bring joy and beauty too.
Right.
You know, it's not a sacrifice to have this incredible magic meadow in your front yard with butterflies and bees.
Of
you know,
course, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned the trees, because what started this was one of the carbon footprints that we did was how many trees you would have to plant to offset your footprint. Mine was 481 a year. And I was like, I actually think that's illegal. That's like reforesting. Yeah, that's funny. And so that was sort of what put me on this, was that there's no way I could plant 481 trees a year. So like, how do I pull that number back?
Yeah, and you know, in addition to kind of reducing that number for yourself and planting what you can, you know, that is where sort of offsets or credits come into play, is you can support reforestation projects in places where that makes sense, and that can be one way to deal with the air travel. Now obviously if you're able to telecommute or reduce the air travel, that's best, or take the train. But if you do have to make a plane trip, there are offset programs where you can, you know, plant trees somewhere or do landfill gas capture or other things that help, because it's all global, so that can matter too.
That's so awesome. And while it is a local problem, this is a massive global problem. What's happening in India is affecting us over here. It's all one planet, you know, it's all connected. So the reason why this whole episode started happening was we were watching Our Planet on Netflix, and
so beautiful.
We got to the episode where the walruses were just dying, and I was like sobbing. It was such a visual, and it was so heart-wrenching to see, and then to realize that we have done this.
Yeah.
And that to me was just like, we've got to figure this out. So what do you see people doing individually that is the most frustrating for you? Is it plastics?
Yeah, plastics is a big part of it. Just overconsumption, just buying things that we don't need, or feeling like buying things for people is the only way to share love. You know, that we've got this very like consumer kind of culture, and that we're just constantly buying stuff. And you know, I always find it, speaking of flying, I always find it kind of upsetting to look at those catalogs that they have of like the things you can buy while you're in the air, because it just hits me like how much of our creative energy as people we're putting into just making stuff.
Yeah.
And that, you know, it really is kind of overwhelming. And I think, thankfully, that people are returning a little bit to an understanding that the best thing that we can give to each other often is our quality time and experiences instead of just things.
I think that that's become more of a realization to me as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
How do we get a younger generation to acknowledge that and to put that into practice?
Well, and one of the things that's most interesting is people often talk about sustainable choices as if it's a new idea.
Right.
And in reality, it's the disposability that's a new idea. If you look back to like your grandparents' generation, anyone who lived through the Great Depression, their culture wasn't to throw things away. They had a culture of fixing things. I mean, my grandma used to unwrap, you know, a present and she would fold the wrapping paper and reuse it. And if there were any leftovers on the table, even a little bit of food waste, you know, food left over, that would get wrapped up and put it in the freezer. You didn't just throw things away. And so we adapt really quickly, and we've adapted to this idea of throwing things away. And I think now we're realizing like, oh, this was a terrible experiment. Like, this didn't work.
Yeah.
This isn't smart. This isn't a good idea. And so in many ways, we're returning to, you know, a smarter and really almost ancient way of living as people, that you know, resources matter and we're careful with them. And you know, if a chair breaks, you fix it. If your clothes tear, you sew it. You know, the kind of repair culture, I think, is a return to old, not a brand new idea.
Now we're seeing the problem because of trade wars, for whatever reason, that we then now have a problem with getting rid of the recyclables. So it sort of feels like it can be very frustrating, sort of like it was all for naught. You know, we finally got to a point where recycling is so commonplace. Yeah. And now what do we,
it doesn't mean it's for naught, but it does mean that there's sort of a waste hierarchy, and recycling does matter, composting does matter, but I think what we're realizing is it's time to go beyond that. It's time to focus on reduction and reuse. Don't buy the thing in the first place, you know, use the reusables. Recycling is still important and beneficial, but it's a lot better if you just don't have the plastic bag to start with.
That's so true.
Or the plastic bottle to start with.
Yeah.
And so it can be challenging to transition, but it's not impossible. And you have people starting, you know, bulk stores and zero waste stores. And again, it's kind of a shift to the old, right? Like, people used to get their milk in bottles and return the glass bottles.
It's true.
And so now we're figuring out, how do we create industrial systems like that with all the advances we have in technology, but using those old ideas of reuse. And
a lot of times when you go to a local farmer's market, it actually is less expensive.
Sometimes.
You know, sometimes.
We have a prize through the Institute of Environment and Sustainability, the Pritzker Prize.
Okay.
And last year, the prize went to a woman, Miranda Wang, and her technology actually takes plastic and breaks it back down into chemicals that can then be used instead of thrown away, which is amazing.
That's amazing.
It's pretty exciting.
That is exciting, because that's what we're also, like, we can make the changes ourselves and we can make the changes within our own communities, but we're also going to need people who are incredibly smarter than I'll ever be to come up with solutions for the crap that we've left them.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
there are so many creative engineers and scientists and designers working on these problems right now, and it's really amazing and exciting to see the solution. I mean, they've found like mushrooms or fungi that can break down plastic. We have one of our teams here at UCLA, they're actually a finalist in the Carbon X Prize, and they have a way of sequestering carbon and making it into concrete. It's actually a huge impact of buildings is the concrete.
Oh my gosh.
So it's really, really cool stuff. I can share that with you too, the CO2crete project. And there's just amazing research happening right now that will also really help. So.
That's so neat. That's another reason why to not tear up my garage floor and put down new concrete is just,
there you go.
It's environmentally better to just leave my old concrete.
Yeah, that is actually true. Yeah. It was interesting, like during the drought, there were some stickers you could get for your car about like going dirty for the drought, showing that like you're not washing your car, but it's for environmental reasons.
It's true.
So, you know, sometimes you can shift and communicate about things like that.
I drive an SUV. So one of the things we did was we got loaned an electric car, which was amazing.
Oh my God. That's awesome. That's cool.
How much does my SUV really contribute? And also, I've also heard that it's just as bad for the environment for me to then throw away the SUV, and that's perfectly fine, and buy an electric car.
It's not actually.
Okay.
So there's a tool that I teach in my class that's a useful tool for understanding impacts. It's called Lifecycle Analysis. And so you look at the total impact of a product from extraction of materials, manufacturing, transportation, use, and disposal or reuse.
Right.
And different products have different impacts on different parts of the cycle. A disposable product would have the biggest impacts in terms of material and like end of life.
Right.
But for a vehicle, the biggest impact is during the use.
Got it.
So although there are materials that go into it, you know, you can get those metals recycled, et cetera. This is why they used to have policy incentives for people to give up their old cars. They would pay you for the old car because it does matter. So switching to electric, absolutely, you're right. You are getting rid of the SUV, but that impact of the day-to-day fuel use is a lot better. So,
Robin doesn't let me idle my SUV anymore. Good. Supposedly that's the biggest culprit. So what you're saying is I should find a very old person who doesn't drive a lot and sell them my SUV.
You could do it that way or just take it off the road. You know, get it scrap metal recycled. The best thing would be
oh my God,
electric.
if they would give me some tax incentive for
and
that car.
They have all electric SUVs now. So if you like that style of car, you can still go all electric. And besides just going electric, there's also how you drive matters. Oh. So making sure that your tires have enough air in them can increase your kind of efficiency, not speeding a lot, and you know, trying to drive a little gentler. You know, people with hybrids sometimes do that. I
don't speed. I actually drive in my old age. And then another question that I'm very curious about is vegetarianism and veganism and the impact of mass farming in our country and other countries. Like, does becoming a vegetarian or maybe doing meatless Mondays for people who love meat, does that have an impact as well, or are we so far gone with the industrialized farming at this point?
It has a huge impact, actually. Yeah, so we have a professor here at UCLA, Jenny J. She's in engineering and also connected to the Institute of Environment and Sustainability, and her whole research focuses on the carbon impact of food and really studying this in a big way. And she has a great website, mealsforplanet.org, that you can check out to learn about this. But it's absolutely true that eating less meat or no meat will have a big impact. You know, there is a little bit of complexity in terms of super processed plant foods aren't necessarily awesome either. Right. But yeah, cutting meat is one of the simplest things you can do to really decrease your footprint. So it's worth looking into. And I think it's really important that people understand you don't have to be a purist about it. You know, Meatless Mondays helps. Anything, any less, you know, meat as a condiment is how some of the nutritionists talk about it as sort of a plant-based diet. You could have a little meat if you need to. Unfortunately, I think some people who go vegan, they get like really extremist and purist about it, and that can turn people off a little. You know, it can just be, Meatless Mondays, doing a veggie burger, having a couple days of being vegan a week or something. It's not all or nothing. It still all adds up in a big way.
Does getting your meat from smaller farmers as locally as possible, does that help?
Yeah, there's sources for more sustainable meat. So if you do have to eat some, definitely go for the farms that are doing it right. Dairy makes a difference too. There's definitely an impact to dairy in addition to meat. So reducing those animal products can definitely help.
Those are my questions. Is there anything else that the little simple swaps that people can make at home right now today that are environmentally and economically efficient, I guess?
I think you touched on a lot of them, and ultimately the important thing for people to know is, you know, sustainable solutions, climate solutions have to be equitable and affordable. And a lot of them are. You know, a lot of the steps that you can take to reduce your footprint also save you money. You know, turning off lights, unplugging your appliances at night, line drying your clothes instead of using the dryer, all of those are going to reduce your utility bills. You know, and again with the fashion, you know, getting into the fast fashion, that's something that's going to help, you know, your pocketbook too. So you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to be, you know, luxury lifestyle in order to do sustainability. It's about kind of simple common sense steps.
Think about your pocketbook, how many Maxi pads we as women use a year, and then, you know, just the impact of that on the environment, and it's, you know, it makes complete sense to reuse.
They have those cups as well that you can try. So there's some good options. I think ultimately though, what I would leave you with is that I think, you know, the biggest impact that we can have, I think it's not just about thinking about reducing our carbon impact, it's about our impact and having a positive impact on the world. And by you making this video, by sharing this information with others, like that impacts way bigger than even your individual footprint. And for other people out there, I would encourage them to think of it that way too. It's not just about those daily choices you make, although those do matter and they do add up, but it's about how can you use your voice? How can you get active? You know, we have teenagers around the world striking from school and talking to Parliament and saying, this is an emergency. You know, and if they can do that while they're in high school, what's our excuse? You know, if you're educated and you have resources, have those conversations with your neighbor, get involved in a local organization, write to your legislator. You know, it's not just about the individual impact, it's about community impact. And I think, you know, there's so many people who do care, and if you connect, then you really multiply that impact.
thank you guys so much for watching this episode. Nurit, that was amazing. I want to hang out and wait for baby birds and talk about monarchs all day.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And right now, I just want you to go unplug all your appliances. Bye.
He's pretty ready to go. There we go.
Oh my gosh, this is like one of the coolest moments in my life.
Yay. Oh, he's
Oh
so
no,
ready.
he's so ready. He's
He's like,
gone.
I'm gone. Yay. It's such a beautiful thing to fly.
Oh my gosh.